Hello and welcome in a Cyno guide. First, before we start, I'm gonna be including timestamps. So if there's a section of the video that doesn't interest you, you can like skip forward. Okay, I guess let's start with talking how strong he is. So Cyno is basically not like an amazing character, but he isn't bad at all. If you want a character that's able to clear the content in the game, including the abyss, he's probably gonna be quite capable of doing that. I would say that he's a slightly worse version of catching, and catching now with Dendro is actually really good. Since his initial banner, a lot of things changed. For example, we got Nahida and some other Dendro characters, so he became significantly stronger than he was on his initial run, but we'll get more into that in the team section of the video. So I guess let's start by going through his kit. Once again, there are timestamps, so if you already know what his kit does, you can skip to the next part of the video. Okay, so his normal attack is pretty bad. It's not worth to level it up. I made a mistake leveling it up because I thought it worked the same way as on Shell, but it doesn't. So you may as well leave it on level 1. His E without his burst isn't anything amazing. You just use it, push forward, do some damage, but it becomes way more valuable after you use his burst. Now moving on to his burst. When you activate it, all of his attacks become infused with Electro and cannot be overwritten. Also he gets an elemental mastery buff and an increased resistance to interruption. The elemental mastery buff is always going to be 100 EM on every level. However, you still wanna level up his burst since it is his most important talent. Also, we cannot go off-field after using his burst, because that's gonna make it so you lose the effect. His elemental burst has 20-second cooldown, which is pretty long, and that's one of his biggest disadvantages. However, his uptime is also pretty high. It says here that it's only 10 seconds, however, it's actually gonna be longer. After each time, when you use your E, you get 1 second of additional uptime, and so it says here you can get 4 additional seconds of uptime. However, if you play Thundering Fury, you can actually do way more E's per rotation, which makes it so you can increase your burst duration up to 18 seconds. Plus, sometimes there is something called hit lag, which makes it so the duration can be even longer. Sometimes you will still be in your burst when the cooldown ends, if you play Thundering Fury, of course, and get all of the buffs here. His first Ascension passive is actually like one of the most important parts of his kit. Basically, after you use his burst, sometimes on the screen will appear something like an eye. When you use your E, when it shows up, you get additional damage. You have damage increased by 35%, and you fire 3 additional like hits that do 100% of Cyno's attack as electro damage. And then his second Ascension passive buffs his first one, and this basically adds an EM scaling towards this passive. And specifically, it increases the damage of those 3 bolts that are created whenever you use your E in the right timing when the eye shows up. And then his normal attacks and his burst are also increased by the EM. Now let's move over to his weapons. His best in slot is of course going to be his signature, which is Staff of Scarlet Sands. As for good 5-star options, Primordial Jade Wing Spear is a pretty good weapon. Staff of Homa is also going to be pretty good. Then as for 4-star options, Deathwrench is going to be one of his best options. However, it is a Battle Pass weapon, so not everyone will have it. You can also play Blackleaf Pole, and it's also gonna be a pretty good option. The catch should work as well. Kitten Cross Spear, however, Kitten Cross Spear has a problem where due to energy drain from the passive, you might struggle to burst immediately. Moonpiercer also seems pretty good. And then, for the 3-star weapons, for the pure free-to-play, you can play White Tassel. It is actually a pretty good option at tier 5. Even though it has a pretty low base attack, it gives you quite a lot of crit rate and then about 50% normal attack damage, which makes this weapon one of his best options. However, I would still recommend going for Deathmatch as a general 4-star option. Moving on to his artifacts, we have a Thundering Fury set, which is going to be one of his best sets, probably the best one. So what this set does is basically, it makes it so you can use your E every around 2 seconds, and whenever you are in your burst, you can, as I said in the talent section, you can use your E at the right moment when the eye shows up, and then you get additional damage. This eye shows up around every 4 seconds, and this is also your cooldown on your E in your burst state. So with this artifact set, you can essentially use your E in the right moment on the eye, then use it once again before the next eye, and then just use it again on the second eye. However, from my experience, I know that you need to constantly keep attacking or have multiple reactions going on, because otherwise you might actually struggle a little with triggering those additional elemental skill hits. However, it is not that hard to do that consistently. His other good option is going to be a Thundering Shooter set. It's in the same domain as Thundering Fury, so you can farm for it. However, you will need the 4-piece set, because 2-piece set doesn't do anything, doesn't give you any offensive stats, but it is also a good option to consider. Then you can go for 4-piece Gilded Dreams. Now, I would say if you want to play Cyno perfectly, you should go for TF, but if you don't want to bother, or if you know that you're gonna be missing a lot of E's with Thundering Fury set, Good Death is going to be better. It's way more consistent, even though it has slightly smaller damage than Pandering Fury. Comparing those two sets, you should probably choose the one that you have better substats on. You can also go for 4-piece Gladiator. It is also a valuable option. You have your normal attacks damage increase. However, that's pretty much it, and you don't get any buffs towards your elemental skill damage, but it is also a pretty valuable option. You can also go with any 2-piece option, and if you have better substats on 2-piece than on any of those 4 pieces I mentioned before, it is likely that you'll be better just going for any of those 2-piece options. Now we can also go quickly through his constellations. His C1 is rather irrelevant. The only thing it really does is just increase attack speed. It could make it so you attack more often, so you apply more element, so it's slightly easier to trigger TF, but I would say it's not worth to go just for this constellation, just for this effect. His C2 is actually really good. It gives you 50% electro damage bonus. His C3 and C5 are the same as for all of the characters, which is just burst and skill upgrades. Both aren't too significant. C4 is really irrelevant. It just gives you summer energy. However, if you're going for constellations as far as for C4, you probably have good enough artifacts not to struggle with energy, so it's rather useless. And then his C6 makes it so during the rotation you're actually able to generate 12 to 16 additional Dust Stalker bolts, which is the thing from his E, when you hit it at the right time. And this constellation is actually pretty good, but it's C6, so whatever. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is his energy generation. He generates energy when he uses his E, so if you play TF, you use more of his E. His energy requirements are gonna be lower by a significant amount. However, if you play him with 2 Electro, it's not gonna be a big issue, or with some Favonius weapons. Now, here's an energy recharge list that I took from Getting Main's website. You can check the website in the description of the video. It is also quite important to note that Favonius weapons can make those numbers kind of vary. However, you won't be getting many procs with those weapons since Cyno has a really long uptime. Now, moving on to his team section, he's actually very versatile. You could just go and play him in a quicken team with usually Nahida, then probably second Electra. Most likely it's gonna be Fischl because she's really good with potential reactions. And then as your 4th option, you should take some defensive character. However, this slot is flex. You can also go with Kazua, but in this case scenario you won't have a healer. And with Cyno you don't really wanna dodge, especially if you play TF, because then it's gonna be really hard to get all of his additional procs. So usually you're just gonna go with Zhongli. For the next team archetype, you could go with Hyperbloom. It is also a valuable option. In this case you could go, for example, Xingqiu and Nahida. You could also go with Dendro MC. Traveler has a pretty okay duration on the burst, which is 12 seconds, which is not anything amazing, but it's okay. We don't really have that many Dendro yet for off-field support. As for Collei, I wouldn't really recommend her. Her burst duration is only 9 seconds long, so you won't really get many Hyperblooms because you wanna have a healing. You could go with Jin, so you get the VV Shred. You could go with Zhongli, so you get the shield and the shred he provides. However, if you don't really need a healer, you could consider going for Beidou. She, unlike any other characters, can't proc the seeds with her burst. So you will have double Electro. You can build full DPS Beidou, so she will be doing damage and she will generate energy for your Cyno, so your energy requirements will be lower. If you go with, for example, Zhongli, you will most likely need to play him on Favlance and a really high energy recharge on Cyno. And you don't really want to go with characters like Fischl. You can do that, but then you will have to build her with EM. You could also go EM Cookie, which is going to be fine, but then you need to build 2 characters with EM. You could go Kazua in order to swirl Cynos and Xingqiu stuff, so they do more damage. Or you can go double Hydro in order to maximize the amount of seeds that you generate. You could also just play him in a national team. However, in this team you will probably need quite a high energy recharge on him, but in a team like this it is mostly probably just Spent and Xiangling doing damage with Xingqiu. Even if you can't get a proper rotation with Cyno in a team like this because of energy recharge problems, you should still be fine. You could try play him in a teaser team, but I'm not sure how well it would work. Another team archetype that you can play with him is called Quick Bloom. It is basically a quicken team, so like I showed before, basically like a quicken team, but instead of, for example, Zhongli, you will go with a character that has a really slow Hydro application. So for example, you can go with Kokomi. She will heal you, she can give you a TTDS buff, though you won't have a pretty good uptime on it. You will just get it once every few rotations, but it's still pretty good. You could also consider playing Barbara, and she should be pretty good in this team. The reason you want to have a slow Hydro application is because you don't want the Quicken aura to disappear. And if you play, for example, Xingqiu, the uptime on the Quicken will be way lower. So Cyno and Fischl will do significantly smaller damage. But if you play a character like Barbara, she will just occasionally generate a single seed, and that's gonna be some additional damage. And she also heals, so that's pretty nice. I think to note here, Barbara's E has some ridiculously long cooldown, so you might need to play Sacrificial Fragments, and it won't proc always. But even if, like, it has a pretty significant chance to proc if you have refinements, and even if it does proc, you can like do it every second rotation and play her as a healer. As for other slow Hydra applicators, could use C6 Candice, however before C6 she's not gonna work here. Also, you won't be getting a healer in a team like this unless you remove Fischl, which is going to be a great DPS loss. Or technically you could use also Mona. She also has a pretty slow Hydra application, but an uptime on this is going to be just terrible, so I really don't recommend it, and you also lose the healing, so it's gonna be even worse. I guess a character to consider here is going to be Yao Yao. However, I wouldn't recommend her because uptime on her E is going to be too short for Cyno, because it only lasts for 10 seconds. However, we don't really have many good dangerous supports right now for Cyno. Maybe it's going to change with Byeeeee or Kave, but we'll see. And so that's gonna be it for the Cyno guide. If you guys have any questions, you can leave them down in the comments. I'm gonna try to answer them. Also, if you could leave a like and sub, this would be really nice. And so that's gonna be it. Bye.